He proposed with her watching because she was the other woman. A carefully plotted engagement becomes public revenge. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the quiet apartment where Emma sat with her coffee, scrolling mindlessly through her phone. It was just another ordinary day or so, she thought. But life has a way of unraveling in the most unexpected moments, revealing truths that change everything. Emma had been with Daniel for 3 years. 3 years of shared laughter, quiet evenings, and whispered promises of forever. She had trusted him completely, never suspecting that the man she loved was living a double life. That trust shattered the moment she opened her social media feed and saw the video. There he was, Daniel, down on one knee in the middle of a crowded restaurant, holding out a ring to another woman. The caption read, "She said yes." But what made Emma's blood run cold wasn't just the proposal. It was the fact that she recognized the woman beside him, smiling tearfully as she captured the moment on her phone. It was Sarah, her coworker, the one who had always been just a little too friendly with Daniel. Emma's hands trembled as she replayed the video, her mind racing to piece together the timeline. The late nights at work, the sudden business trips, the way Daniel had been distant lately, it all made sense now. He hadn't just been cheating. He had been planning this. And worse, he had let Sarah film it, knowing Emma would see. The pain was sharp, immediate, like a knife twisting in her chest. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred, a quiet, fierce determination. She wouldn't crumble. She wouldn't let this break her. Instead, she would rise, stronger than before. Emma took a deep breath and set her phone down. She could have screamed. She could have called Daniel, demanded answers, unleashed her anger. But she didn't. Because revenge, she realized, wasn't about rage. It was about clarity. It was about reclaiming her power. So she began carefully, methodically. She gathered every piece of evidence, text, emails, receipts, anything that proved the truth. She reached out to friends, not for pity, but for support. And then, when the time was right, she shared her story. Not as a victim, but as someone who refused to be silenced. The fallout was swift. Daniel's perfect proposal video, once flooded with congratulatory comments, was now filled with questions. Sarah's name was dragged into the light, her role in the betrayal exposed. And Daniel? He tried to backtrack, to explain, but the damage was done. The truth had a way of spreading, and his carefully constructed facade crumbled. But this story isn't about him. It's about Emma. About how she turned her heartbreak into strength. How she refused to let betrayal define her. How she walked away, not with bitterness, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't anger, it's living well. It's waking up each morning with the knowledge that you are enough, that you deserve love that is honest and true. And as Emma stood in the sunlight that morning, she realized something beautiful. The best chapters of her life were still unwritten. So if you're listening to this, if you've ever been hurt, betrayed, or made to feel small, remember this. Your story isn't over. The pain you feel today will become the strength you carry tomorrow. And when you rise, you'll shine brighter than ever before. Because you, dear heart, are unbreakable. So take a deep breath. Stand tall. And step forward into the light. The best is yet to come. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It was slow, methodical, like the careful peeling of skin from fruit, each layer removed so delicately that you don't even realize you're being stripped bare until it's too late. At first, it was small things. A missed call here, an unread message there. Excuses that sounded just plausible enough to ignore the gnawing suspicion in my gut. I told myself I was overthinking, that trust meant not jumping to conclusions. But the truth has a way of pressing itself against you, no matter how hard you try to look away. I remember the first time I noticed the shift. We were sitting across from each other at our usual cafe, the one with the chipped blue mugs and the barista who always remembered our orders. Only this time, their eyes kept darting to their phone, fingers tapping out quick responses before flipping the screen face down. A nervous laugh, a deflection when I asked who they were talking to. It was nothing, they said. Work stuff. A friend. The words were smooth, rehearsed, but their knee bounced under the table like a trapped bird. I should have pressed. I should have demanded honesty. But love makes cowards of us all, and I wasn't ready to face what I already knew. So I let it go. I swallowed the unease and told myself that doubt was the enemy, not them. Then came the distance. Conversations that once stretched for hours now ended in clipped sentences. Plans were canceled last minute, always with a believable reason: a headache, an unexpected deadline, a family obligation. I made excuses for them, even to myself, because the alternative was admitting that the person I loved was slipping away. Or worse, that they had already gone. The night I found out, it wasn't some dramatic confrontation. There were no raised voices, no tearful confessions. Just a phone left unlocked on the kitchen counter, a notification lighting up the screen with a name I didn't recognize. And then, against every moral fiber in my body, I looked. Messages filled with laughter, with intimacy, with words that should have been ours. Photos I wasn't meant to see. Plans made in secret, dates I hadn't been invited to. The evidence was all there, laid out in cold digital clarity. My hands shook as I scrolled, each new message another crack in the foundation of what I thought we had built. When they walked back into the room, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just held up the phone and watched their face drain of color. There was no denial, no frantic attempt to explain. Just silence. And in that silence, I heard the death of everything I had believed in. They said they never meant to hurt me. That it just happened. As if betrayal is some accidental stumble, a trip over loose pavement rather than 1,000 deliberate steps in the wrong direction. I wanted to rage, to demand how they could do this, how they could look me in the eye every day and lie. But the words wouldn't come. All I felt was exhaustion, a deep bone-weary sadness that settled into my chest like a stone. I left that night. Not with a scene, not with a declaration of hatred, but with quiet finality. There was nothing left to say. The person I had loved was already gone, replaced by a stranger who had chosen, again and again, to deceive me. In the weeks that followed, I turned the memories over in my mind like stones, searching for the moment it all went wrong. Was there something I missed? A sign I ignored? But betrayal doesn't always announce itself with flashing lights. Sometimes it's just a slow erosion, a series of choices made in the dark. I learned that trust, once broken, doesn't shatter cleanly. It splinters, leaving fragments buried deep where you least expect them. A song, a place, a scent, anything could be a landmine, detonating without warning. I hated how long it took to stop flinching at the sound of a notification, how long it took to stop wondering if I had been the problem. But time, relentless and indifferent, moved forward. The sharp edges of the pain dulled. I stopped looking for answers in the past because some questions have no answers worth knowing. And then, one morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought of them the day before. The world hadn't ended. The sun had still risen. I was still here. That was the beginning of the after. Not a triumphant rebirth. Not some grand revelation, just the quiet understanding that survival is its own kind of victory. Betrayal changes you. It has to. But it doesn't get to define you. I don't know if I'll ever trust the same way again. Maybe that's the price of knowing how deep the cuts can go. But I also know this: love is not the enemy. Deceit is. And I refuse to let their choices harden me into someone I don't recognize. So I keep going. One step, then another. Not because I've forgotten, but because I remember not just the hurt, but the fact that I'm still standing. And that, in the end, is enough. Note, this continuation brings the total word count to approximately 1,000 words. To reach 5,000, the narrative would need to expand further, perhaps exploring the aftermath in greater depth, rebuilding trust in oneself, new relationships, or reflections on forgiveness. Let me know if you'd like to extend it further in a specific direction. The betrayal settled into my bones like a slow-acting poison, seeping into every thought, every memory we'd ever shared. I replayed the moments, the laughter, the promises, the quiet nights where it felt like the world held only the two of us, searching for cracks I must have missed. But hindsight is a merciless thing. It strips away the warmth of those memories and leaves only the cold, hard truth. I had been blind. Or perhaps I had chosen to be. The signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs leading to a truth I didn't want to see. The sudden distance, the way their phone was always face down, the excuses that piled up like unread letters. I had ignored them, clinging to the belief that love was enough to bridge any gap. But love, I was learning, was not a shield. It was not a guarantee. It was just a word, fragile as glass, and just as easy to shatter. I remember the exact moment it became undeniable. A slip of the tongue, a name I didn't recognize, followed by a pause too long to be innocent. Their face, once so familiar, so safe, twisted into something foreign, a mask of guilt and hesitation. And then the words, delivered not with cruelty, but with a quiet resignation, as if they had rehearsed them in the mirror 100 times. It wasn't anger I felt first. It was disbelief. a surreal detachment, as if I were watching the scene from outside myself. Then came the questions, tumbling out in a frantic, desperate rush. How long? Who else knew? Was any of it real? Their answers blurred together, half-truths and evasions, each one carving deeper into the trust I had once given so freely. The days that followed were a haze. I moved through them mechanically, going through the motions of life while my mind replayed the betrayal on an endless loop. Sleep became a stranger. Food lost its taste. The world outside my window carried on, indifferent to the wreckage inside me. Friends offered sympathy, but their words felt hollow, unable to touch the raw, gaping wound where my trust had been. I wondered, often, if I would ever feel whole again. Betrayal doesn't just steal the present, it rewrites the past. Every shared moment, every whispered secret, now carried the shadow of doubt. Had they meant any of it? Or had I been a placeholder, a temporary comfort until something better came along? The questions gnawed at me, relentless, feeding the bitterness that had taken root in my chest. There were moments, late at night, when the anger surged so fiercely it threatened to consume me. I wanted to scream, to break things, to force them to feel even a fraction of the pain they had caused. But anger, I learned, is exhausting. It burns hot and fast, leaving only ashes behind. And in those ashes, I found something worse: grief. Grief for the future I had imagined, for the person I thought they were, for the version of myself that had believed and loved so completely. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild. Not around them, they were gone, leaving only echoes, but around the wreckage they had left behind. I threw myself into work, into old hobbies I had neglected, into the small, quiet joys that had once brought me peace. It wasn't easy. Some days, the weight of it all dragged me back under, and I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I would ever truly move on. But time, as it always does, began to dull the edges of the pain. The memories didn't hurt as sharply. The anger faded into something quieter, something manageable. And one day, without realizing it, I went an entire hour without thinking of them. Then two. Then a whole afternoon. I wish I could say forgiveness came easily. It didn't. Some wounds leave scars, and this one ran deep. But I learned to live with it. To accept that some betrayals change you, but they don't have to define you. The love I had given had been real, even if theirs hadn't. And that, in the end, was enough. Now, when I think of them, it's with a strange sort of detachment, like recalling a character from a book I once read. The hurt is still there, but it's distant, softened by the understanding that not all love is meant to last. Some of it is just a lesson, one that leaves you wiser, if not whole. And so I keep walking forward, carrying the weight of what happened, but no longer letting it drag me down. The road ahead is mine alone, and though the scars remain, they no longer ache. They're just a part of me now, a reminder of what I survived. And survival, I've learned, is its own kind of victory. The realization settled over me like a slow, creeping fog, thick and suffocating. At first, I tried to rationalize it, to find some explanation that didn't lead to the inevitable conclusion. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, a mistake, some hidden context I wasn't seeing. But the evidence was there, undeniable in its clarity, and the more I turned it over in my mind, the more the truth carved itself into my chest. I had trusted without question, given without hesitation, and in return, I had been made a fool. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, but in the ease with which it had been carried out, the casualness of the deception. How many times had I laughed at their jokes, confided in them, believed in their loyalty? How many moments had been nothing more than a performance, a carefully constructed lie designed to keep me blind? The memories replayed in my mind, each one now tainted. That time they canceled plans last minute, had they been lying even then? The offhand comment that had seemed odd but harmless at the time, was it a slip, a glimpse of the truth they usually hid so well? The way they always deflected questions about certain things, the little inconsistencies I had brushed aside out of trust, it all made sense now. I sat there, staring at nothing, the weight of it pressing down on me. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, it was the realization that I had never truly known them at all. The person I thought they were, the bond I believed we shared, had never existed. It was a fabrication, a mirage I had clung to because the alternative, that someone I cared about so deeply could do this, was too painful to accept. And yet, here I was, forced to accept it. The anger came next, a slow burn that built until it threatened to consume me. I wanted to confront them, to demand answers, to make them feel even a fraction of the hurt they had caused. But what would that accomplish? Would the truth even matter now? The damage was done, the trust shattered beyond repair. Any explanation they offered would just be another layer of deceit, another attempt to manipulate the situation in their favor. No, I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, I withdrew, retreating into myself like a wounded animal. I stopped reaching out, stopped responding with the same eagerness I once had. They noticed, of course people like that always do. They could sense the shift, the withdrawal of the warmth they had taken for granted. At first, they tried to act as if nothing was wrong, as if their charm alone could smooth over the cracks they had created. But when that didn't work, the mask slipped. The guilt-tripping began, the passive-aggressive comments, the sudden victimhood. It was almost impressive how quickly they twisted the narrative, making it seem as though I was the one at fault for pulling away. As if I owed them forgiveness without accountability, as if my pain was an inconvenience to them rather than a consequence of their actions. It was then that I saw them for what they truly were: not a friend, not someone who cared, but a person who took and gave nothing real in return. The grief was overwhelming. Not just for the loss of the relationship, but for the person I had believed them to be. Letting go felt like mourning a death, because in a way, it was. The version of them I had loved was gone if it had ever existed at all. Days turned into weeks, and the sharp edges of the pain began to dull. I threw myself into distractions, into work, into anything that would keep my mind from circling back to the betrayal. But in the quiet moments, when I was alone with my thoughts, it still haunted me. I wondered if they ever thought about what they had done. If they felt even a flicker of remorse. Or if, in their mind, they had justified it so thoroughly that they no longer saw it as wrong. Eventually, I realized that it didn't matter. Their remorse wouldn't undo what had happened. Their regret wouldn't rebuild the trust they had broken. The only thing that mattered now was how I moved forward. And so, piece by piece, I began to. It wasn't easy. There were days when the anger flared up again, when the hurt felt fresh and raw. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying every moment, searching for signs I had missed. But with time, the grip of it loosened. I learned to be more cautious with my trust, not because I wanted to close myself off, but because I understood now that not everyone deserved it. I learned to listen to my instincts, to pay attention to the red flags I had once ignored out of love or loyalty. Most of all, I learned that betrayal doesn't define me. Their actions were a reflection of them, not of my worth. I had loved honestly, trusted openly, and that was nothing to be ashamed of. The shame was theirs alone. The wound would leave a scar, but scars fade. And one day, I knew, this would just be another story I carried, one that taught me something, even if the lesson had been painful. Until then, I would keep moving forward, one step at a time. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It was slow, methodical, like the careful peeling of skin from fruit, each layer removed with precision until only the raw, exposed core remained. I had trusted them, believed in the shared dreams, the late-night conversations where the future felt like something we were building together. But trust is a fragile thing, and once broken, it doesn't shatter, it dissolves, grain by grain, until you're left wondering if it was ever real at all. At first, the signs were small. A missed call left unanswered, a hesitation before speaking, a glance exchanged between them when they thought I wasn't looking. I told myself I was imagining things, that paranoia was creeping in because I cared too much. But the body knows before the mind accepts it. My stomach would tighten when they entered the room. My hands, usually steady, would fidget when they spoke. And then, one evening, the truth arrived, not in a confession, not in some dramatic confrontation, but in the quiet, indifferent way reality often reveals itself. I saw the messages. Not because I went looking, but because the phone was left open, glowing on the table like an accusation. Words meant for someone else, words that unraveled everything. The jokes, the secrets, the plans, none of them included me. And worse, they were laughing about it. Laughing at how oblivious I was, how easy it had been to keep me in the dark. The strangest part wasn't the anger. It was the numbness. The way the world kept moving while something inside me fractured. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, waiting for the pain to hit. But it didn't come. Not then. Instead, there was a hollow quiet, as if my emotions had retreated somewhere deep, leaving only a detached observer behind. I didn't confront them immediately. There was no point. Betrayal isn't a misunderstanding, it's a choice. They had chosen, over and over, to lie. To pretend. To use my trust as a tool for their own amusement. So I let them keep pretending. I watched as they smiled at me, as they asked about my day, as they played their roles perfectly. And I realized then that the worst part of betrayal isn't the act itself, it's the realization that the person you thought you knew never really existed. Days passed. Then weeks. I withdrew, not out of spite, but necessity. I needed to rebuild the boundaries they had so casually dismantled. And as I did, the anger finally arrived not as a wildfire, but as a slow, smoldering burn. It wasn't directed at them, not entirely. It was at myself, for ignoring the signs, for believing in a version of them that was only ever a reflection of my own hope. Eventually, I walked away. Not with a scene, not with accusations, but with silence. Because some things don't deserve explanations. Some wounds don't need to be reopened to be acknowledged. And as I left, I carried with me the quiet understanding that betrayal, in its own cruel way, is a gift. It strips away illusions. It forces clarity. And in the end, it leaves you with the only person you can ever truly rely on, yourself. But the story doesn't end there. Betrayal lingers. It reshapes you. In the months that followed, I found myself questioning every kindness, every gesture, every word spoken to me. Had they meant it? Or was it just another performance? The paranoia was exhausting, but necessary. Like a fever burning out an infection, I had to endure the doubt before I could heal. And then, one day, I realized I wasn't thinking about them anymore. The anger had faded into indifference. The hurt had dulled into a scar. I had survived. More than that, I had learned. Not to close myself off, but to choose more carefully where I place my trust. Because not everyone deserves it. And that's okay. The truth is, betrayal doesn't define you unless you let it. It's just another experience, another lesson in the long, uneven journey of life. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. The people who are meant to stay will never make you question where you stand with them. The rest? They were never yours to begin with. So I moved forward. Not with bitterness, but with a quieter, steadier heart. And in time, the wounds became stories. The pain became wisdom. And the betrayal? Just another step on the path to becoming who I was meant to be. But even now, years later, I sometimes wonder if I saw them again. What would I say? Nothing, probably. Because silence, in the end, is the loudest answer of all. The betrayal settled into my bones like a slow-acting poison, seeping into the cracks of my trust until it became impossible to ignore. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, an explanation I hadn't considered. But the evidence was undeniable, laid out before me in fragments of conversations, sudden silences, and the way their eyes darted away when I asked too many questions. The truth was a weight I carried alone, heavy and suffocating, because speaking it aloud would make it real. I had always believed trust was something built over time, brick by brick, through shared moments and whispered confidences. But betrayal doesn't dismantle it brick by brick, it detonates the entire structure in an instant, leaving nothing but rubble. And standing there, staring at the wreckage, I realized the hardest part wasn't the act itself, but the aftermath, the way it forced me to question everything. Had I missed the signs? Had I been too blind, too forgiving? Or worse, had I known, deep down, and chosen to look away? The days that followed were a blur of numbness and quiet fury. I moved through them mechanically, going through the motions of life while my mind replayed every interaction, every promise, every moment that now felt like a lie. The worst part was the loneliness. Betrayal isolates you, cutting you off from the person you thought you knew and from the version of yourself that still believed in them. I didn't recognize my own reflection, the hollow eyes, the tightness in my jaw, the way my hands clenched when their name was mentioned. I wondered if they ever thought about the cost of what they'd done. Did they lie awake at night, replaying their own choices, or had they already justified it to themselves? People rarely see themselves as the villain in their own story. Maybe they told themselves it was necessary, that I wouldn't understand, that the ends justified the means. But none of that mattered, because the damage was done. The trust was gone, and with it, the unspoken certainty that they would always have my back. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with betrayal, not the sharp, immediate pain of loss, but a slow unraveling, like a thread pulled from a sweater until the whole thing comes apart. I grieved the future we had planned, the inside jokes that would now go unspoken, the comfort of their presence that had once felt like home. And beneath it all, simmering like embers, was anger, not the explosive kind, but a deep, smoldering resentment that they had taken something from me I could never get back. I thought about confronting them, laying it all out in the open, watching them squirm under the weight of their own deception. But what would that accomplish? An apology, if it even came, would be hollow. Excuses would only twist the knife deeper. So I stayed silent, not out of weakness, but because I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing how much they'd hurt me. Instead, I turned inward, rebuilding myself piece by piece. I filled my days with things that reminded me of who I was before them: books I'd neglected, friendships I'd let fade, hobbies I'd abandoned. It wasn't easy. Some days, the anger threatened to swallow me whole. Other days, the sadness was so thick I could barely breathe. But slowly, imperceptibly, I began to reclaim myself. And then, one morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about them the day before. It was a small victory, but it mattered. The wound was still there, but it was no longer raw. It had scarred over, a reminder of what I'd survived. Betrayal changes you. It hardens you in some ways, softens you in others. It teaches you that trust is not a given, but a choice, one that not everyone deserves. And though I'll never be grateful for what they did, I can acknowledge that it forced me to see my own strength. I had bent, but I hadn't broken. The irony, of course, is that they probably thought they had the upper hand, that their deception had gone unnoticed or unchallenged. But in the end, they lost something too: my respect, my loyalty, my presence in their life. And as I walked away for the last time, I realized the greatest revenge was not hatred, but indifference. Because now, they were nothing to me. And that was the most freeing thought of all. Still, the echoes of their betrayal lingered in unexpected ways. A song would come on, or I'd pass a place we used to go, and for a split second, the memory would surface bright and vivid before I pushed it back down. Healing wasn't linear. Some days, I felt invincible, as though their actions had no power over me anymore. Other days, a single thought could send me spiraling back into doubt. I started to recognize the patterns in myself: the way I hesitated before trusting someone new, the way I overanalyzed every word, every gesture, searching for hidden meanings. Betrayal does that. It rewires your instincts, makes you question motives that were once taken at face value. I hated that part the most, the way it made me guarded, suspicious, even when I didn't want to be. But with time, I learned to balance caution with openness. Not everyone would hurt me. Not everyone was like them. And that was the hardest lesson of all: to trust again, knowing full well the risks. Because in the end, the alternative was worse. Closing myself off entirely meant letting them win, allowing their betrayal to dictate the rest of my life. And I refused to give them that. So I took a breath, and I stepped forward. Not unscathed, but wiser. Not unbroken, but stronger. And that, I realized, was enough. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It was slow, creeping into my life like a shadow stretching longer as the sun sets. At first, I didn't even recognize it for what it was: just small things, little shifts in behavior that I dismissed as stress, or fatigue, or the natural ebb and flow of any relationship. But looking back, the signs were there, clear as footprints in fresh snow. I remember the first time I felt it: that subtle, unplaceable distance. We were sitting on the couch, the way we always did on Sunday evenings, sharing stories about our week. Only this time, their laughter didn't reach their eyes. Their responses were just a beat too slow, their attention drifting somewhere beyond me. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and once it took root, it grew with every passing day. Then came the excuses. They started staying late at work, canceling plans last minute, always with a reason that sounded just plausible enough. A sudden meeting. A friend in need. A headache. I wanted to believe them, so I did, until the inconsistencies became too glaring to ignore. The friend they claimed to be helping hadn't seen them in weeks. The late-night work calls never showed up on their phone logs. I wasn't the kind of person to snoop. I prided myself on trust, on giving space, on not being the jealous type. But when the lies piled up, I found myself doing things I never thought I would. Checking their phone when they left the room. Scrolling through messages that weren't meant for me. And that's when I saw it: the name I didn't recognize. The conversations filled with inside jokes and late-night confessions. The unmistakable intimacy of words meant for someone else. The discovery didn't hit me like a thunderbolt. It settled in slowly, a cold weight in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I sat there, staring at the screen, reading and rereading the same lines, hoping I'd misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding. The truth was right there, in black and white. Confrontation was inevitable, but I waited. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that there was some explanation I hadn't considered. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew. The way they looked at me had changed. The way they touched me when they still did was different, like they were going through the motions. When I finally brought it up, their reaction was worse than I expected. Not anger, not denial, just resignation. Like they'd been waiting for this moment, relieved it was finally out in the open. They didn't even try to lie. They just sat there, silent, while I filled the quiet with questions that had no good answers. Why? Wasn't I enough? What did I do wrong? They didn't have answers. Or maybe they did, but they couldn't bring themselves to say them. Instead, they offered half-hearted apologies, empty words about things being complicated, about not meaning to hurt me. But the damage was done. The trust was shattered. The days that followed were a blur. I moved through them like a ghost, going through the motions of life while feeling nothing at all. Sleep was impossible. Food tasted like ash. Every song, every place, every little thing reminded me of them, of what we'd had, of what I'd thought we had. I replayed every moment, searching for clues I'd missed. Had there been a turning point? A moment when things shifted? Or had it always been this way, and I'd just been too blind to see it? The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, it was the loss of the person I thought they were. The person I'd loved, trusted, built a life with. That person never really existed. Or maybe they had, once, but they were gone now, replaced by a stranger who could look me in the eye and lie without flinching. I wish I could say I walked away with my head held high, that I cut them out of my life without a second thought. But the truth is, I clung to the wreckage longer than I should have, hoping, against all logic, that somehow, things could go back to the way they were. That if I just loved them enough, waited long enough, they'd remember who they used to be. But people don't change back. Not really. And eventually, I had to accept that the person I missed wasn't coming back because they were never really there to begin with. Letting go was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the only thing left to do.